Welcome to another episode of Badass Banking. Today I'm with Ann. Ann, is it Legg?
It is
Legg?
Legg. Yeah, because
Legg.
it can only be Legg because you traditionally have two of them, so you should have two G's.
Okay, and it's Ann with an E.
Correct, because I have a beautiful English history, so that E is British.
And I'm Brian with a Y because of England as well, so
Right.
British. Yep, there you go. Maybe Scottish. It depends which relative you ask. So
you're all from that part of the world, so we all probably have family.
That's right. Well, you never know. So tell me about how things in San Diego today. No fires, right?
No fires today. We are struggling with a big old heat wave, which is unusual for us. And it is what's really unusual for San Diego right now is it's 92% humidity. So
that's crazy. That's every day here. But San Diego, that's insane.
Yeah, we don't know what to do with it. Everybody's a little bit of a cranky, wilty flower right now, on top of being a cranky, wilty flower. So.
There you go. So tell me about the company. So the name of the company is Thrive Strategic Services, correct?
Going by Thrive. So what Thrive is Thrive is kind of the culmination of a lot of my data and credit union knowledge. And what we really solve important for credit unions is two things. Number one, understand how to leverage their data and their talent to improve the members' lives. And we do that through two things. We do a beautiful amount of data education because there is a ton, data is just ginormous. There's a lot, and credit unions have so much of their time going into solving the members' problem that they really need to have somebody say, hey, how do I understand data governance, data maturity, all that good stuff. So part of it's education. And the other part is, okay, let's take all this goodness that you have. I mean, credit unions have more data than Amazon, and say, how do you take that? How do you leverage that with your people and then make the members' life better? So we've done that we've worked with over 600 credit union leaders, helping them launch their journey. And it is a blast and a half, especially if you are nerderific like I am.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to be a nerd to really get into the data, I guess. I mean, I wish more people would get into it. I mean, my big thing for years has been, how do we get banks and credit unions to be relevant and contextual? And the key there is, data. Data allows you to get closer to the people you serve.
100%. And when you think about data, you kind of think about it in like three sort of, gradients, right? You have your descriptive data, right? So everything that you know about your current state. And right now, really, when we think about descriptive, we're really thinking about Excel spreadsheets, right? Everything I've got current state jammed into my Excel. Then you move on into, okay, well, if I can do that, I can then predict, right? And that's obviously where there is hot AI and a bunch of gorgeousness going on there. But really, the end point is I want to prescribe. And that's where I can see a lot of incredible power at that prescription level of where credit unions can say, oh my gosh, I can understand my member and what their problems are and how to get in front of them and prescribe. And I think that's, I guess, what really excites me about the data.
So my own experience has been, and I bank with, I've got a $1 billion, $2 billion bank and a $20 billion bank. Neither do a good job with data. Now, I used to have a relationship with a credit union. I left that credit union because they became irrelevant to me, to be very blunt.
Okay.
Yeah. And rates were no longer an issue. The rates stunk.
Right.
They stink everywhere, right? Zero interest rate market environment right now. But what keeps credit unions and all financial institutions, banks are as guilty, as this, what keeps them from leveraging data?
Well, I think a couple things. I think, first of all, as a topic, data, when you say, hey, leverage your data, it just feels ginormous.
Yeah, it's like that big. Yeah.
It does. It just feels overwhelming, and it feels as if, oh my gosh, it feels like my bookcase. It's like, where do I even start? Do I go even down there? Is there good stuff in there?
Oh, that's a real bookcase? I thought it was a Zoom virtual background.
Oh, check this out. This is real.
Real books. There you go. Okay.
But it feels like that. It feels very overwhelming. And so I think the hardest part for anybody, any financial institution to look at their data is to say, what is feasible to start? Because it feels like you're boiling the ocean. And, when you think about the history of technology and data and credit unions, let's go all the way back to ATMs. They were all like, oh my gosh, we're going to get this new channel, and then there's going to be all this new data, and oh my gosh, the branches are going to completely dissolve, And then you heard a little bit of that with mobile banking. Well, actually, online banking, laptop banking, whatever. It's all going to explain. No, these are just more channels, and there are more ways to understand what that end user is, your member, your customer, and what their needs are. And hey, finance is very personal. So if you can figure out how to make that even better, get in there. So I think it's that overwhelming piece. So that's number one. And then number two, let's just say you say, you know what, I'm going to play with my core data. Like I'm going to try to make this simple and I'm going to get in and mess with my core data. That's overwhelming, right? Because let's just go right to the nut of it. How do you define either a member or a customer? And if you get your leadership team in the room, you're going to have a gorgeous conversation. There might be some possible fireworks. It's really difficult to say, this is how we do this. So that's where you get into things like data governance, which I'm probably the only person in the world who gets excited about that, you know, and then into pieces around data maturity. So just thinking about that exercise of getting people together and say, hey, I'd really like to define a member so that we can have some reporting that's going to be consistent. Nobody's going to say, yeah. They're going to be like, you know, can we go back to the pandemic stuff we had on the table, please?
Yep. Now, when I think of data, I've always thought in terms of when leadership I've met with talk about data, I always ask about the household level data. Mm-hmm. You know, they always say, oh, I know the member or I know that customer. And I'm like, well, what is their position in that household? Right. Are they the breadwinner? Are they the decision maker? Are they simply an influencer in the decisions that are going to be made? The household conversation, it doesn't seem to occur with financial marketers.
Right. And I think part of that problem goes back to identifying how to precisely do that. I mean, I think with algorithms really becoming very precise, I think you can clarify that. But still, if you were somebody who's new to this, you're saying, yes, let's go by household. When you say, all right, well, I'm going to do, you know, address. Well, that could be a bunch of college students or just roommates together. And that's not going to be a household. Or to your point of, hey, I've actually been able to define the household. Who do I know is the key financial decision maker? Well, it depends on which survey you read, and it depends on which age group, and it depends on which gender. So it's not as easy as it sounds, and I think that's why it gets so overwhelming for people. And the way I like to think about data when I think about it is I really like to think about that end user. And this is where, you know, credit unions can have more fun. I say, you know, look, the members come to you. Let's just go straight as if you're a member customer. They come to you because they have 4 very, very easy problems they want you to solve. And that first one is, hey, you've got a shelter problem. I mean, you know, as the end user, I've got a transportation problem. I've got a travel and play problem. And I've also got a rainy day retirement problem. So those are my 4 problems. Please don't talk to me about a loan, because that's just the avenue to solving that problem. Think to me about those problems. And when you think about that, and you think about the data involved in those problems, it's very different and it's very holistic. And then you start thinking about it truly like you would in a pragmatic way, if you were in a tech company, you start thinking about solving this technical solution for the end user in mind, right? So you're really bringing it in and going, okay, well, we need to think about transportation. What does that look like? What does shelter look like? And, you know, travel and play, that seems kind of like an easier one, and rainy day retirement. How are we thinking about them holistically? And then you start realizing, oh, all of my members are multi-homing, which is my nice way of saying, hey, they've got relationships with other people. So other financial institutions. So how do I look at that? And when you get that, and I keep doing this whole hands gesture of holistic, but when you do
that's why this is a YouTube video. You can do that. You cannot do that in a podcast.
Right? So when you think about it that way and you're looking at it, you really can see, wow, this is so valuable. And I can really have an incredible impact into that, you know, customer / member end users life, financial life.
Yep. So, I mean, to me, banks and credit unions should be focused on, I mean, they're enablers, right? I need a house or a place to live.
Right.
I want and maybe need a car, but I want a certain kind of car.
Right.
And, you know, maybe I can only afford a certain type of car. It seems to me that credit unions and banks could get closer to the emotional aspect of purchases than they currently do to demonstrate more proactively advocacy. Right? Because at the end of the day, this is about not just providing what is needed, but proving to that member or that customer that you're there for the long term, that you're there to foster a relationship with that individual and ultimately their household, whatever the household is, if there is a household. And that, to me, seems to be where they're kind of falling short. Tell me about your book. Is it a book or was it a thesis, right?
It's a book.
It's a book? I'm going to have to get that book. Where do I get?
Amazon. Actually, what you want to do is you want to go to AnnLeggThrive.com.
Okay.
That book, because you'll get on there and all sorts of good stuff.
I'll put a link to it. So tell me about the book.
Okay, so the book's kind of a fun story. As you can see here, I've got a gorgeous cover of what looks like a big fat mountain.
Yep.
And it actually is. That is Mount Kilimanjaro. And I happen to have this pretty cool opportunity where I decided that that was going to be my big, huge bucket list. So last year, actually, it'll be a year in October. I flew to Africa and summited Mount Kilimanjaro, which is 19,000 feet. It's the largest freestanding mountain. So or hill, whatever you want to call it. And when I was on it, and it took me 8 days to do so, you have a lot of time in your head, and I realized how climbing Kilimanjaro was a lot like data transformation, the largeness of it.
Yep.
It's big, it is overwhelming, but you need a place to start. And as I started thinking it through, I realized, oh my gosh, it's big data, big climb. And so the funny part was when I had a 30-hour not layover, but to get back to San Diego from Africa. And in that time period, I started realizing, well, what exactly would that look like? And so I started breaking it down, and it really does come down to very simple topics. You know, you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a strategy, you've got to have a vision, you've got to have preparation. And most importantly, when you get to the summit, you've got to figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to get down and what that's going to do with you. So the book actually came together really quickly, which I was really surprised by. And I ended up getting it to market and published 6 months and 1 day to summiting.
Wow. So when it comes to big data, is it good to start small?
So really, it's good to start, actually, it's really good to start around the end user. So let's just talk about the member for a second. When you're thinking about what that member is, think about what those problems you want to solve. And the way I like to articulate that is, what's the friction? Mm-hmm. So there is friction that the member is going to have doing business with you, and there's going to be friction that your organization is going to have doing with each other. Mm-hmm. You can honestly have a conversation about that, prioritize it, figure out what data it can to solve that. That is a beautiful way to start, because you're going to start building up, okay, confidence in how to A, get the data, B, how to solve friction, and then C, most importantly, how to start measuring and making the end user's lives better because of, the data.
Yeah, when marketers talk about data, they think of it as a way to target messaging to people. What you're suggesting is data is a way to reduce the chore of banking or the overall friction, both in the back office, which translates to the front office, as well as, for example, in the digital experience. How do you leverage data in a digital experience?
Right. And so when you think about it, if you think about the member being the end user, exactly. Let's just pick some of these small, tiny end user cases. Like some of the work that I do with credit unions has to do with, oh my gosh, can we remove some of the friction in the online experience, specifically the auto journey, right? Yep. Because there is clearly a purchase journey, and there's that whole I'm going to buy from you. And then when the credit union owns you, right? The member said, I'm going to have my loan with you. You kind of forget around that owning side. And you and I just talked about that. Hey, this member is going to have an auto loan with you for a minimum of 24 to 36 months, possibly longer, depending on those 80-month loans. So what does it look like to have a relationship? Shouldn't you be celebrating the first 100 miles, or if they need to get insurance, or if they need new tires? There's that whole component that you would, if this were another product, you would have that. You'd be checking with them saying, hey, how are you using it? What's it doing? And you've got all this gorgeousness. And when you start that conversation on that own side of the purchase journey, it's amazing what you can find out too. Like you talked about, hey, I want to have a specific car that I can afford. That's a really different conversation, because now you're talking about affordability. You're talking about what else are your other financial dreams, all that good stuff.
Yeah, no, I like that. That makes sense. When it comes to credit unions, is there an example you could provide of a credit union that does a good job? Do you have a data hero, for example?
What I think, so two things on that. Yes, I have a few, but a couple are, at the end of the day, a credit union that is a rock star in data is one that's just ready to go play with it. Mm-hmm. And they've said yes. They're ready to jump into this ocean and say, I'm ready to figure out how to climb the mountain. I have to give a huge shout out to John Jenkins over at Partners. They have some gorgeousness going on in both tool, technology, and talent. And what I love about it is they are really thinking about it in that holistic space. And they're saying, okay, what do I do with the member? How am I trying to leverage the data? And they think about it. I guess the best way of thinking about it is they think agile, not just in technology, but in overall organization. And
is that Partners in Florida?
They're both. It's the combination. It's basically Disney is
their
Disney. Yeah. I
I
don't want
wonder
to
if
call them
that,
the Disney Credit Union, but so they
yeah.
have offices in Anaheim and obviously in Florida.
And Disney is remarkably experience driven. So
Right.
maybe that, translated to the credit union's needs. That's interesting. How about another? You have another, or even a fintech that you think uses data well, or
One of the applications that I really enjoy seeing is, and I think this is definitely something that everybody should be looking at, is Simple Bank.
oh yeah.
Because what I like about Simple is, again, it's going to the end user. And if you've looked at any of the material or unpacked any of it, it's just exactly what I'm talking about. I'm saving for, my favorite one is I'm saving for an engagement ring. And they had this beautiful backstory about that. And it's all about basically making banking invisible.
Yep. Oh, I agree. I mean, the
Yeah.
best bank in the world for me is the bank that I don't even know is there.
Right.
They're behind the scenes making the magic happen.
Exactly. And that's where we were talking about the prescriptive. Like a simple example, that would be rideshare, right? I'm in my Lyft, Uber, what have you, and I'm not actually thinking about anything in my wallet because in my app, I've already figured out payment. So it doesn't matter. The only time I'm probably going to look at it is if I ever look at my statement, which that would probably be in the mobile app experience as well. I'm saying, oh, yeah, that's right. I was on an Uber or Lyft. There you go. That's a beautiful example of that. And I think that kind of goes to something we talked a little bit before we started the conversation. That was, open banking. You want it to be that, as much as this sounds like a branding nightmare, you really do want to be semi-invisible, but you also want to make sure that you're leveraging data, and you also want to make sure you're purposeful.
Yep. No, I agree. I mean, open banking to me is all about the experience that comes out of it for the end user or the customer or the member. Well, listen, Ann, it's been a pleasure. I mean, it sounds like you're doing some really neat stuff. I think there's a huge need for what you're doing. There's talent needs out there. There are strategic needs out there. More importantly, I think the financial marketers need somebody to hold the hand and help them create the strategy and then the tactics to bring it to life. And I think you start small, you give them some results that they can be proud of, and then they will lead them. Then they'll start moving in the right direction, ideally.
Well, to your point, what you've just beautifully summarized is they've got to get some confidence, some data confidence, and coming from that is going to be filling knowledge gaps, which goes back to the education.
Yep, makes sense. Any other last words you want to bring up?
This has just been actually a joy. And of course, if anybody's looking to understand a little bit more, please visit leggthrive.com because I've got more education than probably one needs for this. And obviously there's a lot of free education out there.
I'll put all your info in the links below. That because it's visual, right? With links and everything. It's pretty amazing. And I'll put a link in there to your LinkedIn profile as well. That way you can find you. So if anybody has some data needs, talk to Ann at Thrive Strategic Services. She's got a lot going on. And if you want, go to San Diego to see her because San Diego is a nice place. Although wait till it cools off a little bit, right?
At least till we can get to maybe like 50% humidity, something like that.
Yeah, I can only dream of those days. That's called December here in Virginia. Right. Well, Ann, I appreciate it. For those of you watching, please like, subscribe, comment, plus or negative. I don't care. It's all about collaboration. That's what this space is for. Ann, thank you very much.
Thank you. This is fabulous.